Here's the story. So I've been going over to the store, our store, and I've been noticing these same walnut boards just sitting on top of the pile, just getting picked over. People weren't buying them, which is fine. That's what we allow people to do. You can come in, pick out whatever you want, and leave whatever you want. But I realized maybe some of y'all don't know how to pick out walnut. You might need some help with this, because when I saw those boards, I really liked them. So I brought them home and I made what I thought was a nice set of trays out of those boards. How to pick out walnut, or what you need to know about picking out walnut. That's the topic for today. And you're not leaving until we're done. Now, when you come to any one of our stores, you should find a couple different piles of walnut, all right? One is a premium selection of really curated material that's super clean, super clear, and super brown, almost no sapwood in it. And the other piles are just what we call natural mix walnut. So based on that description, I'm sure you can surmise which one's the most expensive one, right? All the boards that I picked out for these trays came from that natural selection. And that's because I think that's where you find the best stuff. Now, when I picked out the boards for these trays, I was specifically looking for boards with really big knots. Where there are big knots, there is some really amazing figure there. Like when I found these boards, I could clearly see there were these really big knots, even with big splits in them, but it wasn't a problem to me. To some people, they would be off-putting, but to me, I could see all this gorgeous figure occurring right next to the knot, so that's why I wanted these boards. It wasn't a problem at all to me to just fill those cracks with some black epoxy, because to me, that looks good. But you know what? Same thing with this one. I saw this board, it was practically about to fall apart right here, but that just looked gorgeous to me. And I said, that's gonna make a really nice looking tray. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of flaming or feathering figure in there, and that's all thanks to knots. Where there are knots, there are really interesting things happening in wood. And the boards that I found for this third one, similar principle. They had some issues, but it also had some really cool figure happening. This was just too gorgeous to pass up. Even though there were some really big cracks, it was worth it to me to have to deal with those just so I could capture the gorgeous figure in here. So I just chose to fill that with some black epoxy, turn it into a little bit of a feature, and end up with a really unique looking project. So here's another thing to know about really wide boards. When I was selecting this one, it had this huge split in the end, but I was like, I think I'm gonna just rip that and re-glue it back together. Once I got it home, I realized, that's not gonna work out because this board happens to be right on the pith. The pith is the very center of the tree. The problem with that is that no matter what you do, you're gonna end up with little cracks, maybe even really long cracks, because that's what happens at the pith. Not all is lost on this one. This board, because it's nice and wide, I can still straighten out this cracked edge, and I'm left with some really nice straight grain boards that are all hardwood. So this is gonna work out for a project down the road, no problem. What's really common in walnut is the dreaded sapwood, or it's dreaded by some, but it's loved by others. But that's this pale yellow wood that you find in walnut. I really like to look for this in boards when I'm building a project. That's because once it's all finished up, it kind of gives your project a little more of like an artisan look, or even kind of a custom-made look. Either way, it doesn't have that manufactured look, right? Which is arguably what we're shooting for when we're building projects out of wood, right? Is to make something a little bit different. So that's why I like to look for sapwood. The main thing that I really like to do is to arrange the grain in a way that just produces some really cool or interesting patterns, which is what I did with this. I glued this panel up in a way that mated the heartwood together right in the middle, and that left some sapwood out here on the edges, which just has kind of a unique or a special look to it. But that's not the only way to go about it. Here's another example, is this one where I glued it up right there, and just made sure to mate these two sapwood sections together. It gives it kind of an interesting or more special look. I mean, I get that finding boards with sapwood in them it can be off-putting, right? But once it gets put into a project and all finished up, I don't know, the story just changes a little bit, and you get just a really interesting look with sapwood and heartwood mixed into one project. Okay, but let's say you don't like sapwood. All right, I get it. The fortunate thing about sapwood is that it occurs really at the ends of boards and along the edges. Both of those areas, you're most likely going to do some trimming anyway. Plus, check this out. Sapwood is really kind of easy to hide on the backside of a project or on a portion of a project that's just not seen, right? There's a little bit of sapwood right here, but when you choose the right finish, it just kind of blends in anyway. And you may not have even realized that this was sapwood had I not pointed it out to you. All right, I mentioned earlier that you can come to our stores and you're gonna find a couple different piles of walnut, right? One would be premium with just some super flawless material in it. It costs a lot more, admittedly, but it's there for you if that's just absolutely what you need. But I should point out a couple things about these trays I made. You know, these all were made from boards basically from the natural mix pile, and there were also a lot of rejected boards to begin with. Even this one, that's pretty much flawless, right? There was a little bit of sapwood along that edge. I had to hide some sapwood on the back, but I mean, otherwise, that's a pretty flawless project right there. You don't see any blemishes, right? Came from a rejected board. Same thing on these two. Yeah, look at this. All right, like this came from a board that had two great big knots in it, but I just managed to cross coat those off. And then I was able to glue this up and make a cool little hexagon platter plate thing, right? Like, look at this one. This one is flawless. I mean, this too came from some rejected boards. All I had to do was some selective cutting to get rid of the sapwood, and then some little bit of grain arranging to make sure that that knot ended up on the back side. That was it. I mean, in the end, this thing is perfect. All right, there you go. Now you got the insider tips on what to look for when you're picking out walnut for your projects, right? So what are the takeaways? Knots are hiding all the good stuff. A little bit of sapwood goes a long way. And with walnut, it's the wood that does the talking. And let's not forget that a little bit of selective cutting will get you exactly what you want. You gotta see my pile of cutoffs from this. I was trying to use all the bad parts of the boards for all these trays. Now what I'm left over with is a whole bunch of really clear, really brown heartwood boards. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that walnut, yep, it's the craftsman's darling, right? There aren't any other woods that provide such a delightful surprise of beauty from board to board. Anyway, my name is Mark, I'm from Woodworker's Source. We sell woods like this to people like you. We ship it right to your door if you want to, so come give us a visit. Thanks.